a few housekeeping. One of those is the meeting is being recorded. So I hope that's okay with everybody, but we want to share this knowledge with the folks that were not able to be here and wanted to. If you will, make sure that your system is muted until Trey tells you otherwise, because I know he's a dialogue guy. So I want to make sure you have that opportunity, but not until we're ready. And that includes me. So you don't hear all the sirens and things that are going on outside my door. If I can at this point, I want to make sure everybody knows about Trey. Trey Deadwyler is, we like to call him the service nerd, because he has an extensive knowledge and expertise in servant leadership, mindful leadership, volunteer management, and national service. So we have utilized poor Trey multiple times for various groups to train. And I even brought my niece to one of his trainings so she could be aware of some of his good education. So he's been involved in American Red Cross, Atlanta Police Department, Communities and Schools, Morehouse College, Spelman College, Points of Light Foundation, AmeriCorps, Angels in Distress, Love Beyond Walls, the list goes on and on. But he's been involved with a lot of different nonprofits and groups. And so he offers a lot of experience. He also has received more awards than I didn't even know existed. The AmeriCorps Innovation Award, the Presidential Volunteer Service Award, Aspen's Institute for Emerging Nonprofit Leadership Fellow, Georgia's Ford Young Game Changers, and most influential by the magazine. So as you can imagine, this is a treat that we get to have him. And I hope everybody will take notes, but mainly pay attention, because you're going to be doing some thinking after this meeting about what he's going to talk about. So Trey, I'm going to let you take it over, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I really appreciate it. Good to be back with you all. Some of you all probably have met before, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me again. Again, my name is Trey Deadwyler. Today we're going to talk about volunteer management. We're going to talk about essentials of volunteering. And I think it's interesting, when I was talking to Browse earlier today, and I was just thinking about everything that we could cover. There's a lot. So today it's going to be it's going to be more of a survey of when it comes down to the essentials of volunteer management. We can do an 8-hour talk. We can grab some coffee, come back, grab lunch, and have a full day of this. But what I'm hoping to do with you today is give you some things to think about. Most of us, and hopefully as you probably see in the title, if you build it, we would come. We probably had that mindset for a number of years. If we have a great experience, or everyone wants to volunteer, people are just like us. That's not necessarily the case. And so I want to present some ideas here to you, and some methods, some tactics that allows you to really move the needle forward, grab the people and attract the people that you really want to actually serve with your position, your organization, whatever you have going on within your organization. So just a little bit more. That's me over there with the t-shirt. That's funny. But I think Caroline gave me a great introduction. Thanks so much. But again, excited to be here. I've been a coach for a number of years, worked in national service, an AmeriCorps alum, worked and built just about programs, initiatives, and opportunities, just about every issue area you can probably imagine. And so what I do is try to come in with that amount of knowledge, and just thinking much more holistically than just a narrow focus on one, maybe just education or just environmental stewardship and so on. I have enough experience, I believe, at this point to kind of see things and how people are attracted to different opportunities. But before we get into that, I like to start off every single one of my workshops with an ask of you. One, I'm going to ask you to take notes. This is extremely important, because we understand, I think most of us start to understand, that the pen and the pad, the pencil and the paper have a much better memory than a lot of times in our minds. And so I'm going to ask you to please take notes throughout today. As you see, we're going to go through the points of power, the key learnings, things that are on the slides. You also have a copy of this recording, but it does help with retention and application if you can take notes. And I have a particular way of asking to take notes. There's one way of taking notes. Think about the points of power, just the things that are on the screen, things that you find interesting, place those on one side of the paper or one side of the screen. On the other side, I like to say that we make notes. On the making notes is we start to look at how we can apply this information to our overall life and leadership, to our work, to what's going on in our sphere. Now, if you get stuck in trying to figure out what that is on the making note sides, here's a framework that I use when I'm working with in my mindful leadership session, but also just about every workshop. Here's a couple of questions that I want you to ask yourself as you go throughout today. Just write these down somewhere. You'll find this, I think, is it next week or the week after? I think for those that are AmeriCorps related, there's the state and national conference next week or the symposium next week. And I think these can be really helpful as you're going into any particular workshop moving forward. First question to ask: why is this important? This information important to my work, important to me, important to my community, and so on. Second question you want to ask yourself is: how can I benefit? What can I benefit from learning this information? What's the most useful method to interpret it? Excuse me. How can I apply this knowledge today? And the fifth one that I think is the most important when you talk about retention and application is that if you were to teach this, if you were to share this information that you've learned today, what other perspectives would you also include? Keep that in mind. It's basically, and that's going to be one of my charges. As you leave today, if there's a way that you can do a quick synopsis in an email to the people that could not be here, that's going to help you retain everything that we shared today. Well, not everything, but about 90%. So keep that in mind. So take notes, and you can use this framework for mindful learning and thinking to make notes. If that sounds okay, everyone, if you're on camera, give me a quick thumbs up. Right on, right on. So let's get into the work. This is just some questions I like to start us off because I think it makes sense for us to think about how service matters in certain ways. But I think this idea that we started off with, and I remember growing, really growing in my work, thinking how, if everyone wants to volunteer because service was a part of my life. I remember, my parents were for the police department as well as the fire department, or they were nurses or doctors in some particular way. So we had this thing where we were always helping people. I have a lot of ministers in my family as well. So we were always very others focused. And I realized when I started working, I think my first job really working at the police department, I noticed that necessarily wasn't the case for everyone. But I want you to think about, the impact that our service can have on us personally. This just to kind of start us off. I want you to think about the most meaningful projects that you've ever done in the area that you're most concerned. Think about the area that you're most concerned and just think about, what's the most meaningful thing that you've done in that space. If there's a project, is there activity, if there's a fundraising, something, I just want you to think about that for a quick second. And I would love for us to share too. What were some of the activities? What were some of the things that you accomplished? What was even think about some of the feelings that you actually had about that service or that opportunity. Take a moment, and if you would like to share, you can place it in the chat, or you can please feel free to jump off, come off of mute and let us know. Tell me about a meaningful service opportunity that you had, and it could be something that you designed yourself. And if it's not, that's totally okay as well. And as a facilitator, I understand I do a small silent count in my head. Then I start calling on people. No, I'm just kidding. I will share mine if that helps. One of the most meaningful service projects or service opportunities I ever had really started many years ago. I would say about 17 years ago, when I was serving with the American Red Cross. And I remember it was such an interesting opportunity because we were doing this back then. We were doing youth development. I was doing a puppet show. And if anyone that's ever worked with the Red Cross, if you remember the First Aid Fox puppet show, it was quite interesting to do those things. And so we volunteered to be puppeteers in those moments. Back then, this is when we were using CDs for the soundtrack. So we really didn't have to voice them. We only had to play the CD and sync it with the puppets. So back then I used 2 puppets. I was First Aid Fox and another character at that moment. This time we were at a particular school, elementary school. And then if you remember how CDs used to work really, terribly, every now and then they would skip. Right. And so the idea, we were going to go into this place and really teach first aid skills using puppets to first and third graders. Right. Just telling people and teaching them how to call 911, what to look for, all of those things. The most interesting thing about it, because the CD was starting to skip, actually, and then it completely went out. And so at that point, I had started volunteering for so long, I actually knew all of the parts for First Aid Fox. So we voiced the rest of the puppet show. Of course, we made it through the puppet show, but I was just feeling so bad about it wasn't the experience that I really wanted them to have. Fast forward 24 hours. I get a phone call from my director in the EOC, and she says, "Have you heard the story?" I'm like, "What story? What are we talking about?" Turns out one of the young people that was actually in our puppet show, used the skills that we taught them that day with the bad puppets and all the bad voices, every single thing that we taught them to do, the process to actually call 911, connect to and say, connect with 911, give them the right information and all the first aid tips that we provided. They were able to save their dad's life that next day. Or that evening, actually. And it was on the news for a quick second. I didn't find out. I was like the last person to find out. Everyone else knew. So it was a big deal. But I remember the impact that it had on me, that even when things that I feel that were going wrong, with the right heart, the right effort, and the right activity, that it can go in the right direction. So that's probably my most meaningful service opportunity. It stays with me all the time, that even if I'm just there to sow seeds, and everything else can happen from there. What do you have in the chat? Someone says, "I went to some colleagues, Hurricane Florence, to help clean up in New Brunswick. With small impact, but it was good to be with the colleagues, with one family as they were experiencing loss." Someone was a volunteer coordinator for elementary school. I was able to recruit high school seniors to come volunteer and provide tutoring for 30 students, 1st to 5th grade. The program was a great success for both the learners and tutors. Someone says, delivering Meals on Wheels, seeing smiling faces on the elderly that may not have had any personal contact we've had to visit it. And let's see. We visited a South Carolina center in South Carolina and built an outside courtyard for community folks to come and enjoy free meals and have a safe place to stay if needed. Great things. Let's see what else. I'm seeing more. The Appalachian Service Project for a week, a little consistent power sleeping on the cot. We created new steps on a trailer that received water from the creek. It was hard, but it was worth it for those families. So think about that. Those moments and these experiences that we're having, these experiences that were created for us or that we created ourselves. When we think about it, the meaningful service opportunities were really one of those that really help us. The meaningful service opportunities rather helped us really really help reinforce the good that we were there to do. And I say that and keep that in mind because it's something that you need to keep in mind all the time. It's not necessarily, it's what we've learned over the years, and this is just simple social psychology. If we can create and push the attitude, we'll push the action first, right? If we can get people to actually volunteer in a particular area or take a particular action, just even if it's a small step, and it's positive, it helps to develop and also reinforce the attitude around the idea that we are actually supporting, right? And this works a lot of places. But if you think about it, when people are volunteering and they don't have a lot of information about the issue or the challenge in that space, right? But if they can take an action, just do a little volunteering in that space, do a quick a day of tutoring, an hour of tutoring every couple of times, every couple of days, something of small action. It reinforces an attitude that actually helps to reinforce again, more of that same behavior moving forward. And then it kind of keeps the wheel moving. So think about it from the other side. Have there been any negative volunteer experiences that you've had? I would love for you to share those. I won't share any of mine here. I'll actually just throw it over to you. Have there been any negative volunteer experiences that you've had that you care to share? Kathy says, anytime that the leaders don't provide direction and we stand around just moping and just, eating the granola bars and drinking water. Definitely. Times when those being served are not treated well or with dignity. Yep. Directionless, no expectations, no set for volunteers. So there was poor organization, can't figure out where they're supposed to be, where, who to report to. So a lot of this is dealing with organization, right? Really not knowing where people are going, not being relieved from shift. That's also connected to organization and capacity when there isn't clear and objective mission. So we know some of the things that happen. We can pretty much dissect and discern basically these are the challenges. These are the challenges that create a negative experience for our volunteers. So we know what's going on. We know what works well, and also kind of know what works not so well. So thinking about that, I'm going to ask you again, last question. What do you feel right now for you are some of your key challenges, if any, when it comes down to volunteering in this particular time or at this particular moment? And the reason I'm asking that, because that's going to help us guide this conversation as we move forward. COVID. I thought that was going to be like number 3. And I'm just kidding. I knew that was going to be the case. Is everyone on the same page of that, thinking about COVID? Balance of moving forward and the caution of COVID. Can you repeat? The question is basically, what is the key challenge that you're having when it comes down to volunteering and volunteerism for your organization right now? Moving to remote volunteering without in-person training, getting the word out. Perfect. Okay, so this is good, because what we're going to talk about a little bit today is thinking about how do we tap into those unutilized volunteers. We're also going to talk about a little bit how we look at our organizations in a way so that we know how to target based upon what we do, or at least what the service opportunity really is. And I think this is something important for us to really think about, because sometimes we use the old, for lack of a better term, the shotgun method, where we really just send out information, let's see where it lands and go from there. Most of us are probably on Facebook or some sort of social media platform, and they are doing a bang up job when it comes down to marketing to us, understanding our interests, understanding our likes, dislikes, understanding who we are connected to, understanding what influences us in a particular way. Facebook, Instagram does a lot of that. And you think about it, that's just good old fashioned marketing. And for us that have been in the nonprofit sector for quite some time, if we don't have, a lot of times, one of the things that we don't have the best budget for, the largest budget for, is marketing for us. We do a bang up job when it comes down to actually service delivery, but in many cases, it's about getting the word out and targeting those volunteers and targeting even our potential funders with the right information at the right moment at the right time. So keep that in mind as we move forward. That's what we're going to talk about today. And remember what I said, if we can enable a positive experience, we can enable a positive attitude. And if we do that, we can enable a positive experience, and it keeps going. That's what I'm hoping for us to do today, by just adding a little, knowing what our barriers are, but also turning that marketing, putting on that marketing hat for us as we move forward. So here's the thing that I always ask for us, and these are things that you just should know. And these are sometimes some of the barriers when it comes down to communicating with the outside world or potential volunteers or whomever outside of our organization. Knowing our organization and knowing our community or our area that we're serving. What is it that you do best? That should be written down somewhere. You should automatically know that. If we were doing an interview with you right now, and you were called, in the next 30 minutes and said, hey, what is it that you do best? I think it can be sometimes very difficult for organizations to really talk about, especially if you're in a crowded space, what is it that you do best? But you should be able to articulate that, especially if you're recruiting a volunteer. We're doing something one-on-one. You should be able to articulate what is it that you do best as an organization. Now, if you have a specific organization, specific service experience, what's unique about this? There are people recruiting for the same people all the time. And most people that volunteer, right? It's a part of the ethos. It's a part of who they are, right? So what is going to attract attract this person to your service experience more than this person in this organization? Hopefully you have an answer for that. What are some of the key objectives? So knowing what you're going to do, but also knowing what the WIFM is. If you don't know what the WIFM is, that's the what's in it for me. Most folks are volunteering for a couple of different reasons, and we're going to go through that affiliation, sometimes influence, sometimes for achievement. Sometimes also, if they can be very altruistic, so they're looking at ways that they can fulfill who they believe they are. I like to say that usually folks are moved, especially in our space, and people like to volunteer because it helps to reinforce who they are. It'll reinforce who they believe they are becoming, how they want to show up in the world, and what they want to do. And so I think that's important for us to understand. If we can understand the key motivations for folks, we can attract them to our particular opportunities. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Oh, side note, also, this is just something, a little bit of plug. If you go back and look at your language on your website right now, is it reader-focused language or is it us and we? This is what we do and so on, especially if you're trying to you're trying to recruit someone to your organization. You can talk about that of course, this is totally okay when you're doing your about us page and all that good stuff. But when it's on the recruitment tab of your website or any language that you're trying to bring people in, if it's not giving them a visual of how they will be a part of your team, you're probably missing the mark there. And what I mean by that, this can be something as simple as, so when I do this for AmeriCorps teams, sometimes we shift from AmeriCorps members do X. Simple as that, so we do AmeriCorps members will commit to 1,700 hours, blah, 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 blah. Instead of doing that, just a quick shift, you as an AmeriCorps member, you will do X. It's a simple shift in language, but what you want to do in that space is give them a way to visualize themselves in the position, in the service experience, and you'll find that you'll see a little bit better conversion in your recruitment as well. Let me check our chat right quick. So many volunteers and not enough work. Okay. Keeping them engaged until we can really get back together. Okay, so we're going to try to address a good amount of this. I'm not sure if we can get to everything, but I appreciate it as we move forward. Any questions before we move forward? Okay. The second thing I wanted you to think about, so as we think about, what's in it for me, we're looking at knowing your organization and understanding that we know that understanding what, just kind of understanding how we can create the attitude by creating the right actions and positive actions. And we can continue to create an ethos of volunteering moving forward. There's another way I like to look at it. How do we structure it? What is it really? How do we attract those key individuals or those volunteers for the right position at the right time in the right moments? So there's a small story. You've probably heard this story before. It's a part of the civic engagement continuum, the way I describe it in many cases. When we look at, are we a direct service organization? Are we capacity building? Are we policy? Some of us are in this space right now. And each one of these are necessary, truthfully. I think all of them together help build movements, help build movements, and also help us to actually push the needle in the way that we really want it to go. The only way that we can actually really solve the issues of poverty and homelessness and so on is that we need folks doing not only the direct service piece, but also looking at how it works, what policy changes need to happen and occur in some other places. Now, this is not one way or the other. I'm not advocating for doing any lobbying, but it's just a way to make sure that you are aware of where you are in this fold. So the way the story goes to describe what this looks like, and I think I have enough time to tell it. So there was a river, something like this, not very long, but pretty much you can tell. And there was a particular community on both sides of the bank, and it was a really thriving community. At one particular point, there was folks that would go out and they would use the river to collect water, fish, bathe, all that good stuff back in the day. And one day there was an individual that went out to actually collect water, do all the different household chores, and notice while they were standing in the river, taking care of their chores, they noticed a little something coming down river. There was this bundle. It looked like a little basket. Right. So it was Weave's basket that came down, but they also noticed a voice. They noticed a little bit of crying. They noticed something coming down river. Now, this may be a story that you think but it may not be the story that you think I'm going. And so what happens is that, the young man scooped the baby, they took and noticed that it was a baby in the bundle. Trying to figure out what was going on, looked up river, couldn't see anything, yelled and see, hey, can anyone help? But of course, no one was able to help at that time. The young man took the child, went back to the village, and actually took it to their parents. The parents said, "Okay, what do we do here?" Of course, at this point, they noticed that okay, the baby needs to be fed, it needs to be taken care of, and they decided to adopt the child, moving it forward and going forward from there. Right, make sure that it was clothed, fed, and all basic needs were taken care of. Right. Next time, a couple weeks later, same thing happened. Young man was in the river, noticed another child. Oh man, that's another. Then they noticed before he even got out of the river, another child was coming down. Now, this seems like a little morbid story, but listen to what I'm saying here, knowing where you are. Then they pulled the children out, brought them to the village, and the parents said, "You know what? We're not going to be able to do this all alone. We need more people to actually take care of all these children." So of course they started an orphanage where they can take care, educate, and support these young people that were unfortunately abandoned at some particular point. So as the orphanage thrived, they learned how to really be really efficient in how they served their orphans, the young people that were actually pulled from the river. At one point, and this thing kept going, they would keep going to the river. They kept pulling children out of the river and moving them to the orphanage. But the children were absolutely thriving. They were taken care of. They were definitely healthy, and it kept going for months and even years. It was at one point we noticed someone had said, "You know what? There's something else that's going on here." And there, a couple of folks, two people in particular, start to make a journey up the banks, up the hill, to figure out where and what was the source of this challenge. Now, I give you this story because I think it's important for us to know when we are designing service opportunities where we are, but also understanding for where we are as an organization, what it is that we really do. I think there's usually 3 different levels when it comes down to the service opportunity. I call that first level, which is that direct service, that altruistic level. That is focusing on the immediate needs. We try to figure out how do we, take care of any hurt, harm, or danger at this point. Make sure make sure the person is fed. The physiological needs are taken care of. So think about, that would be, feeding someone, going to a food bank and contributing. That's donating food, donating money here and there. Or like you said, pulling someone out of the river, those immediate needs, providing safety. The second level, which I call the capacity building piece, is that advocacy or that galvanizer. Think about the orphanage, the group of the family that created the orphanage, and along with other community members. They have a little bit more knowledge what's going on. We're creating organizations to help us do more things to scale and much more efficiently, like most of us are in right now. We're working with organizations. We have a mission statement that is focused on a particular task. We work collectively to actually solve that challenge and take care of that task. The last one is actually the activists, those two people that went upriver and start thinking about policy, right? Some of us are actually on the call right now. They're thinking about the same way. They're thinking about how policy affects everything down the line. Now, each of these areas has a particular way of recruiting. If we want to recruit lobbyists, or we want to recruit advocacy or advocates for our work, and we want to recruit folks that actually just focus on the immediate needs, that folks that want to work in the office, that folks that want to be our cheerleaders and whatever they be, we need to know who they are fully. I just throw this in here because I think it's extremely important so that we know what we are and who we are, so that we can recruit people that actually connect to who we are and what we are. Does that make sense? So, and this works everywhere, by the way. You can start looking at this in a lot of different spaces, just knowing, is this an altruist service opportunity? This is something that we can do in the galvanizing space. Is this something as an activist? But I will tell you this, when you look at great movements, you needed all three. You can't do, I think do what you can, but you're going to be turning your wheels if you don't focus on, if you just focus on policy development while the folks are still coming down the river, and that's, that takes a little bit of time. At the same time, if you're just focusing on the river and you're not going up to figure out what's going on there, upriver, that's going to create some challenges there. So we don't want to create this cycle or this leaky bucket, as I like to call it. So we need the movement. We have to do all three. So we think about that in your overall work. Where are you doing the immediate needs? How well are you doing the galvanizing, that capacity building work? And then also think about are there people or where you're connected to that policy piece. And that may just mean being a policy advisor. I would say a lot of times for us, we're so close to the work that we can be great when it comes down to policy advice. So other things that we want to do when you just start to design your project, along with understanding where you are, is think about what's going on in that particular community. Who do we know? What do we know? What are the current contributions from the residences already, right? So think about what are people doing in that community? What I used to really detest is folks coming into communities, and I would used to call it parachuting. They would come in and tell people what they need. I think that becomes really problematic because there's an old saying that, anything created for me without me is probably not for me. And so we have to look at, when we're going into communities, we want to make sure that we are designing and co-creating with our communities. Understanding the local institutions, where people are gathering, where they exchange information and share, fun times. What type of groups are set? Are there particular neighborhoods that are pretty close niche? Are there associations like homeowner associations? Are there different groups that you need to be connected to? Again, where are people gathering? How do they show care? That's understanding the culture. I like to throw this in here because I think it's important. Who are the sages and who are the creatives? If you think about the people that carry the wisdom and also how arts and culture connect, sometimes if you can connect with the right artist, you can connect with the right right leader that has that is respected. You can actually move some mountains when it comes down to creating opportunities. What are current institutions already doing in the area? Sometimes we don't need to overstep. We just need to know. So to not overstep, we need to know what's going on already. Are there organizations that are doing some of the projects that we would like to do? Can we just contribute and support? Or do we need to do something totally different that actually adds to success there? What are we currently doing that can really contribute? And then what is the challenge they would say in the community is actually the challenge of most concern for us? Let me check the chat right quick. Cool. Now, once we do that, we have the information. Again, data is extremely important, right? And so we know where we are. We're like, okay, we are more so, we're going to design something for the direct service piece. We're going to do something more so that we can work here in the office, or we're going to need someone to actually be a volunteer lobbyist for us in our state house or whatever it may be. Well, first thing we need to do is actually understand what we want to accomplish, define the scope. So that means understanding in that scope, what are the time and days that we need? What are the time requirements for it? Can it be scaled up and down? Meaning, can we get a mass of people or is it something that's really focused particularly on for this one day or for this one person or this small group? Think about diversity as well. Not only diversity, I think sometimes diversity from a traditional demography standpoint, but also I like to have a lot of diversity of thought as well. That can possibly be really helpful, especially if you're doing policy development, you want to support there. If you're doing anything that's physical or that's in person, if you probably can, or even outside, think about the weather impact. I also like to make sure that we're thinking about accessibility, even if it's virtual. Thinking about how we can ensure folks that have particular disabilities can still use and still volunteer where possible. And then, of course, costs related to skilled labor if we need it, as well as anything else like materials, for example. Now, in the materials, we're talking about different supplies. If folks need the volunteers to actually have their own computers, or they need supplies if you're doing community cleanup, these things are still small here. If they are volunteer bus drivers, think about that. Think about it as well. Strategize and think about the types and amounts that you really need. Sometimes this can be filled in, of course, with in-kind. We're seeing a lot more of that nowadays. I think people are holding on to their cash, seems like. I don't know if you all have noticed that lately. Think about partners and local groups that are already in that space. So as I said earlier, think about who's already doing the work. And maybe we can jump into partner, not take over, jump into partner and see where we can share resources and move forward. And make sure that you are thinking about things that you need to purchase as you move forward. I see one thing in here. Someone says we have a community council that meets monthly, includes local leaders, nonprofits, and churches. That way we can collaborate and work together instead of 10 different agencies working on the same issue. We also have a daily blog that helps us to keep in touch on a daily basis. This is absolutely fabulous. And thanks so much for contributing that. I do think this is necessary. Again, this idea of parachuting, I've seen it attempted so many different times, it barely ever works out. The idea of getting people involved in their own, in their own enrichment is really important. I think about that as a coach. Most of the time, I'm really not giving answers. I'm actually giving the right questions and allowing them to, creating an environment for empowerment, so to speak. So once we have the materials, sometimes it's time to think about our volunteers even more, right? So consider some of these variables. This volunteer skill level, what do we actually need to actually get this thing done? Skills, knowledge, abilities, I think those are extremely important. I used to talk to my AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps program directors a lot about this. Do you really need someone with a master's degree to tutor someone in first grade? No. You may need a high school diploma, or you may need someone just actually in fifth grade. To do these things. Think out the box of what you may necessarily need, but think about the skill level that's absolutely necessary to get the job done. Volunteer age connects with that as well. think about the duration of the project. Meaning, is this going to be a one-day thing? Is this going to be something that's going to be something frequent every day after school, 3 p.m., so on and so on? So keep that in mind. Can this volunteer opportunity be physical? Is it virtual, or is it a hybrid type of model? We're seeing a lot of that in COVID, during the COVID times right now, where sometimes they will be on campus. And I've even seen recently where they're on campus, but they're in a different room. I don't know if you all have seen this yet, but I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. They're on campus, but they're in different rooms, or they are they're in the big gym area now, spread out in as much as possible. We're seeing a lot of different things, but think about how you can actually engage people in a lot of different spaces. Because I think that's going to be necessary, especially in this time of COVID. Think about physical, but don't forget about the hybrid opportunities as well, where they can probably even meet first, if possible, and then move to a virtual space. Now last year was a big shock, because we had to shift so fast. But I think some of us are having better opportunities, and we've learned some things over the last 18 or so months that has helped us really do these hybrid models. I'll throw it over to you. Have there been any big successes where you've seen on the virtual side as well as a hybrid model that allowed you to really thrive in the COVID during this COVID kind of period?
I think there are a lot of colleges that are allowing virtual internships. And if you can provide work or activities for these students to accomplish their goals in their program, the potential is there. Since I've been doing this job, I've had recruited 3 different colleges, 5 different interns for a placement for social work virtually.
Beautiful. Did you have an opportunity to meet them in person first, or it was started off virtual and moved forward, in that sense?
No, it's all virtual.
Cool.
Met them on a Facebook group page for the program at on the college face.
Love it.
And just put my information up there and said, if you're interested, contact me, and they did.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Someone says we recruited people to help with remote and Zoom tech and physical fitness training, and engaged 10,000 participants last spring. We also had translators from around the world to help translate a 100-page fitness training guide. That is awesome. So this capacity building work has been much easier as well. I think one of the things this is also opening up, and I know we talked about COVID being a little bit of a strain, but because so many people are home, they may have a little bit more availability. You think about the time. I don't know about you, but I know we've talked to I talked to a number of folks that said, you know what, I have a little bit more time in the morning. I have a little bit more time in the evening because I'm not in traffic. Or, I may, my schedule is now a little bit more flexible. So I find that I can do a little bit more during the daytime, that I did not necessarily have because I was in the office. So I think this is a way of looking at our underutilized volunteers as well, where we probably would have engaged before, but this is a great way to start to increase and start to connect with those that we saw them, we noticed them. We would only usually have them during our big hoopla events, our big day of service, our big annual fundraisers, and so on. But we're looking at ways that we can actually engage them in the small episodic opportunities as well. Don't forget about this if you have the human resources, make sure that you educate them. Think about orientation. If someone said earlier, you think about when you're sitting around, don't have anything, you don't know what to do, make sure that they understand their task, but also give them a view of what type of impact they're having on in this particular area. So and I like to say sometimes not only the impact on the impact on the issue area, but also what they have probably noticed about themselves. This is why reflection is extremely important. We may not have, I'm pretty sure looking at our time, we don't have enough time to talk about reflection as much, but I think adding a reflection component makes it even more meaningful. Think about the service opportunities, and you start to reflect on the positive experience that you had. Again, if you have that positive experience and that allows for a positive attitude around that particular experience, you'll probably be more likely to actually come back and do that activity again. Does that make sense? Hopefully so. So think about this as you move forward, and I think we're going to break for questions in just a second. But think about as you're creating your volunteer opportunity, you know what you want. Sometimes it's all about creating the right document. And it's just a guide to help us understand what it is that we need, what it is that we don't need, skills and everything. So putting it all in paper. But this document or this position description as a document, just as it would be for any other position description, helps to attract, and it's going to go out to the community to say, hey, this is what we need. We would love for you to be involved. These are some of the benefits. These are some of the tasks and so on. And so I actually think about it in this way. So we want to make sure everything aligns and meets the need of the organization, right? We also want to keep in mind risk management now, especially in the times of COVID. One of the things that I know some organizations, many of our organizations were doing, were putting certain clauses connected to their position descriptions and agreements related to COVID or any, related to COVID injuries and sickness and so on. You want to think about those liability issues even more now, especially if you're working with young people or any of our vulnerable populations. That is absolutely necessary. There's already protections around those. Protections for these populations, but keep that in mind that you want to be very aware and make sure that's a part of your policy. Making sure that also when you're thinking about position descriptions, will people be available to actually do the task? When I worked for Red Cross many years ago, we had our DAT, our disaster action teams. We wouldn't really put people on call every single week for the same amount of time, especially if it's a 1 o'clock night, night response, 1 a.m. response. Here locally, we just had a pretty interesting, well, I won't see you call it interesting. I think it's wowing. It was actually kind of odd. We just had this gas explosion on the east side of Atlanta, and it was a huge explosion. And we didn't know where it came from. So of course, Red Cross is responding to it, but they wouldn't necessarily come back. Those volunteers that went out to respond wouldn't come back to that, wouldn't be necessarily on call the following day and the following day and the following day. So make sure that you leave some leeway for volunteers to be available. And that means you can also have more volunteers be involved. Also, last thing I would say is keep in mind the type of volunteer training that you actually need for your effort as well. Is it something that's going to be really heavy? Do they need any type of certifications? Of course, do they need any background checks? This connects to risk management and liability. Even if it is virtual, they may still, I'm pretty sure they'll need some sort of background checks to work with our vulnerable populations. So keep those things in mind as you move forward. I'll pause here for any questions before I move on. Cool. So in our last couple of minutes, what I'm going to do is I want to get to something because I know I have a little bit more content. I want to get to this. This is something that's going to really help you. And I call this our volunteer or candidate persona. This is something that I think can really help you when it comes down to moving and attracting the right people. For me, and for most of our folks that have done any type of marketing class, we have to talk to the pain points or the pleasantries of the person. Provide a solution, affirm, and advocate who they are. Again, if you are able to talk to the pain points or even advocate or allow them to affirm who they are through your service opportunities and experience, you're probably going to recruit them fairly easily and allow them to come back. They're going to come back on a regular basis, so you'll be able to retain them. This is something here that I would throw out to you. and this is what I use a lot of times when I'm recruiting. I think about the experience of the person that I really need. My ideal client, thinking about after I have my position description, I think about my ideal volunteer for this position. So what experience do we really need? What skills, knowledge, and competencies that we need? What are their work cultural affinities or their cultural affinities? Basically, where do they best thrive? What type of work culture do they need? Do they work really well in groups? Do they work really well alone? Do they work really well remotely or in person? What are some of the pain points? What are some of the things they may be even disgruntled about, or they would like to change, things they really want, that they care about a lot? At the same time, what are their motivation and values? Values being key, because that values is basically anything you are willing to exchange your time, your money, and your energy for. What are some of their hobbies, connections, association, and groups? And what are some of their influencers? For example, if I'm looking for a particular leadership position, if I want to recruit veteran Victor, right? I think about, I look at his skills. He has skills in facilitation, leadership development, communication. His culture that he likes to work in, he likes a relaxed environment. He loves the team approach. His pain point, he's looking for a new stage in life, right? His interest, he likes to be outdoors. He likes producing videos. He loves mentoring. He loves reading and so on. What do you think this person, what type of connections do you think this person has? Let's just looking at his persona. Who do you think he's connected to? You place that in the chat. What groups or associations would you think this person would be? Other veterans? Yes. So there's veteran groups, right? Right? There can be the American Legion. There are different veteran groups that you can actually connect to. What else? This person also loves outdoor activities. Yeah, absolutely. Hiking clubs and so on. The reason why I'm asking you to do these things, it's something right now to get our volunteers, we have to go where they are, right? That's why at the beginning I said, if they build it, will they come? Not necessarily. We have to actually go out and target them. So we have to think about where they are and where they are in the world. So if I'm creating even a Facebook ad or Instagram ad or something like that, where I'm trying to get the word out about our volunteer opportunity, first thing I need to do is create a persona that's perfect for this particular position description, this service experience. So I think about, let me go back. So I think about the experience that I would like this person to have, skills, knowledge, and so on. And I can start to use, structure my language, even in that ad or even that position description that talks to all these places, all these things. But I can also use this to target. As I think about this ideal person, this ideal volunteer, you know what? We probably don't even think about it. Hiking groups are all over Facebook, right? Some of these folks are looking for leadership opportunities. This makes things seems kind of obscure, but it may be a great place to target this person that you want to come in and do a leadership training or to be a mentor in some particular way, that loves to be outdoors, right? A reading club. You want someone to become a tutor. There are reading clubs in our social media places. There are different things and different groups all over the internet right now, just to recruit virtually, that we just start to connect with them in certain ways that we may be able to get a different type of or a pool of volunteers that we didn't even know that we could probably actually grab. Let's see here. People will fit conservation work. Someone says here community programs and so on. I hope this makes sense. And I know we're kind of running out of time, but I want you to stay here. Think about, and you'll get a copy of this. I'll give a copy of this presentation to the team as well to share. And it breaks down basically how you want to actually target your persona. I use this all the time, not only for people that I'm hiring, but also when we're creating volunteer opportunities, even AmeriCorps positions, we use this kind of this persona template to actually identify who we're going after, what we're going to do, and what we're going to do, and how we're going to talk to those individuals as well. Talking to their pain points, talking to their values, and talking to their motivations. Now, with the last couple of questions, this is a Q&A. Sorry, Braz, I went a little bit over, but I would love to, if you have any questions for me, I'm open here. This is your time. If you would like to throw any questions toward me, I would love to answer.
Well, I think at this time, if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, I think you covered most of the ones in the chat while they were coming through.
Okay.
So feel free to unmute and ask a question or pop them in the chat.
Thanks, Crystal. Joanne says, also, if you're on a near military installation, reach out to them. Many need volunteer hours to get promotions. You can use it as a bridge. Absolutely.
Trey, I'll go ahead and ask a question since, you know, when I think I've been approaching finding volunteers as people who would be naturally interested in the areas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I go and think about it from who do I have a connection to?
Mm-hmm.
Those two things. But at the same time, that's a very limiting perspective. And so, you know, do you have any suggestions for how I could broaden that recruitment, or how to broaden my thinking about the recruitment is really the problem?
I would say, again, start with that persona and creating. Once you look at that, once you start to expand, especially on interests or interests and pain points and motivations, you start to you can start targeting folks that may have those same values and motivation that may necessarily be interested in the area just yet. But again, if we that really does, it can create a spark. If we can just invite, and we start, you know, we can invite them to an experience with us, it can really now inform them about the issue area, which can also create, if it creates a positive attitude around the issue area, they're probably they're more likely to actually come back and actually be a long-term volunteer. We've seen that time again where folks that have never volunteered before had a really positive experience. They didn't think about it wasn't a part of their culture. It wasn't a part of who they thought they were, but they found something. Maybe it was the people that they volunteered with and the good time that they had. It could have been the connection that they had with the individuals they were serving, or they learned something about themselves or about the issue that was like, oh, I should probably do more here. And so I would say start off with, remembering that the number one reason people are usually volunteering is because they are asked. And a lot of times people don't volunteer because they probably didn't think, we didn't think to ask them. So try to start there. Ask as many people as possible, be targeted, but talk to them in the language that helps they can, really see themselves in the position and answers the what is in it for me. Saw something else. Misalignment of corporate volunteer group desires and the reality of the events that we provide our needs. That actually, that happens a lot. I don't know if we can get into it now, but thanks so much for that. Any other questions that I can address before we close?
Hey, Trey, this is Browse. I just have a quick question.
Yes.
What are some quick tips on really meaningful marketing, especially once you start to have these changes or maybe some mission alignment, realignment or whatnot? Best ways of marketing and getting the word out.
Okay. So first thing I want you to do is sell the benefit first. Don't sell the task. We do that a lot. Start off with the benefits. So think about think about a lot of times we're moving people with values. Big, main motivators for folks is basically what they exchange their time, their money, their energy for. So think about what people value. This is why we're asking for that in that persona. So the first thing I would do in my marketing information, I would, instead of putting the benefits down at the bottom, of your position description, lift it up to the top. Are you someone that likes to X? Where you could, are you someone that loves to be outdoors? Are you someone that loves children? Are you someone that loves IT and designing new innovative ideas? Are you, so you lift those things up first so they can say yes as soon as possible. Then move into some of the details of what it looks like. If you look at and you can just do a quick scan on position descriptions across the internet, you'll notice they start off with the what it is, before they talk about the why or the benefits. I think that is a big error and a big no-no in my book. Move up the benefits, talk about the why of it, and then allow everything else to follow and proceed. I think that's a big deal. I actually had a couple slides that I was going to show you how to do that. If you have the link and you have the deck, you'll see we're going to shift those things around. Browse, did I answer your question a little bit?
It did. Thank you so much.
I would assume that applies to millennials.
Yeah, I think it applies to, I think it applies to not just millennials, but just about anyone. I think when you look at how people are motivated, I think if you lift it up, I think Simon Sinek has a great book called Start With Why. And so you lift up that why, lift up the benefit. The WIFM has always been around. The what's in it for me, it's always been around. And that's what people are focused on. They want to volunteer because they feel that it's part of duty. They want to volunteer because it helps them be, they believe it better. They believe they'll be a better person, or they feel concerned about this issue area. So lifting those things up, allowing them to, again, reinforce who they think they are, who they are trying to become, what they want to do in the world, and how they want to do it. Lift those things up, because that's when they see themselves in the position and they see themselves and they can make a difference, or at least it affirms who they are. They'll be more likely to do it. So I don't think it's necessarily just one or two generations. I think this is just kind of a little bit, I think it connects more to human nature for us and how we actually move through the world. Most of us are motivated by, I would say, and where we actually also have those conflicts is like something dealing with our values. Talk to the values of people and watch how things move. I think going back to WIFM, this is old stuff. Yes, go back to the WIFM. Follow through and connecting who you are in the nonprofit. This is helpful. Thank you so much. Well, I think I kept you over about 10 minutes. I'm sorry. I can be, again, I had so much information I wanted to cover with you. I would love to, if you need anything else, my information is here on the screen. You can reach me at Trey@thinkforgood.org, Trey@theservicenerd.com. I'm on social media. If you just literally do a quick search for the hashtag #ServiceNerd, you'll find my face and all my information there as well. Feel free, if you have a question, send some information there, and I'm usually available all day. So thank you all so much, and I will talk to you very soon. Keep serving, keep thriving, and keep doing and being the best of America, I would say.
Trey, thank you so much for being here. We loved every minute of it. You were wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.